Hearing will come to order. I want to welcome everyone here for the first of what will be an extensive series of hearings on the future of the Shuttle program and of the manned space flight programs in general. This is a pivotal moment in NASA's history, and this committee intends to lead the way in examining the issues that will enable Congress and the White House to chart NASA's future. Perhaps I should say in, quote, confronting the issues, end quote, because moving forward will require asking tough questions and facing up to tough choices. We will be better able to do that because of the extraordinary work that has been done by Admiral Gaiman and the entire membership and staff of the Columbia Accident Investigation Board. The board members have been inspiring models, independent, focused, inquiring, tough, candid, and accessible. The board report has to be the starting point for setting NASA's future course. If the shuttle is to return to flight, then at a minimum, every single one of the CAIB's return to flight recommendations must be implemented. That includes the recommendation that NASA have a detailed plan for addressing the organizational and cultural deficiencies the CAIB has so convincingly described. Indeed, Mr. Hall and I wrote to Admiral Gaiman back in the early summer suggesting just that sort of recommendation to help ensure that NASA would act on the central recommendations concerning organization and culture. I think all of us need to face up to the rather disheartening picture of NASA that has been so painstakingly drawn by the board. If we fail to do so, it's readily apparent that we will just have to go through this same sad exercise again. NASA's experience may be the ultimate proof of Santayana's famous observation about those who fail to learn from the past being doomed to repeat it. The sad fact is that the loss of the Columbia and her crew was preventable. This is not even close to being a case in which the problems could only be seen in hindsight. We need to clearly identify and root out each of the systemic and individual failures that led to this accident. The CAIB report is a blueprint for doing so. The memory of the Columbia crew compels us to do no less. I have to say that I am concerned about some of the ways NASA has been approaching the return to flight thus far. I admire Administrator O'Keefe, and I'm pleased he has embraced the CAIB report with his words. But deeds are what count, and I'm concerned that NASA may already be rushing to meet unrealistic launch dates instead of examining this report closely and moving deliberately. I'm also concerned that NASA has been trumpeting changes in its safety organization that do not appear to address any of the problems that have been persuasively identified in the board's report. Delay is not the goal, but if safety is to improve, NASA must not be judging itself by how quickly it can send the shuttle back into orbit. And undue haste is ill-advised for another reason, too. We as a committee and as a nation need some time to consider our overall space policy. We need to make fundamental decisions about the future of the shuttle program and of the manned spaceflight program. We need to get, perhaps for the first time, accurate cost estimates of what it will cost to run the space shuttle and other manned programs safely, and accurate descriptions of what they will be able to accomplish. I, for one, am not willing to write NASA a blank check for the shuttle program. We also need to have a better appraisal of what the risks are of operating the space shuttle, because even after implementing the CAIB recommendations, the shuttle will continue to be a risky vehicle, and I'm not willing to see the shuttle fly without regard to the level of risk. Finally, we need to better define NASA's overarching human spaceflight vision, something that has been lacking for more than a generation. That won't be easy, and it can only be done after hearings that will enable us to make a clear-eyed appraisal of the costs, benefits, and risks of different options. So I approach today's hearing soberly because of the tragedy that has brought us here and the daunting tasks that lie ahead. But I also approach today with eagerness because we have a rare chance to reshape our nation's space program, and we will be able to benefit from the outstanding work of Admiral Gaiman and his team. I look forward to hearing from them. Mr. Hall.
Chairman, thank you for a good opening statement, and I think it's a statement that we all need to keep and to refer back to as we proceed and as we adhere to and recognize the findings of the Admiral and his colleagues. So I say to you, Admiral, again, good morning, and thanks for your openness. Thanks for your being available to anyone who wanted to talk to you about anything. And thanks for the work you've done, you and all of your colleagues, and thanks for the work we'll be expecting you to do and the oversight we'll expect of you in the days that lie ahead. The nation owes a great debt of gratitude to all of you and to your staff for your very dedicated service. I'm grateful to you, and I think every member up here is. When you began your work 7 months ago, it was not at all clear that we'd ever unravel the physical cause of the accident, and there will be some who are not totally satisfied with the findings, but I think you have a lot of backup material there and that they can refer to, and I just, indeed, your report, I think, makes it very clear that a series of reviews over the years since the Challenger had uncovered some of the same sorts of problems that you found during your investigation. This committee needs to get your best assessment of why these problems have continued to occur and what will be required to keep them from causing another accident. Your answers will help me shape legislation that I'm developing. It'll help others of us shape legislation that we're developing to provide for continued oversight. And the end of the 2-year period, the first really important 2-year period, we don't want this thing just to dwindle away like it did after the Challenger. We want to keep it before people and keep the goal in sight, and that goal in sight should be safety, safety, safety. If real estate people say location, 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 I think the American people today are calling for safety. I know that there's a lot that want to know who was at fault for the Columbia accident. Maybe they wanted names and things like that, and that's understandable, but your report makes it clear that the conditions that ultimately led to the accident were not just a result of a few individual actions. I personally am not as interested in assigning the blame as I am to working to fix the problems identified by your investigation. We're going to need your help in determining the best way to proceed from here on out. In that regard, I'm very interested in your recommendations for returning the shuttle fleet to flight. This committee needs to know why you included the items you did, and equally important, why some potential tasks were not included in your recommendations. Mr. Chairman, the Columbia Accident Investigation Board has performed a very important service. Now it's up to Congress, I think, in cooperation with the White House and in cooperation with the NASA administrator, to make this report work, to seek and find and ferret out every area of safety that we can, to consider issues that are beyond the board's charter. And namely, we need to decide on some concrete goals for the human spaceflight program and be willing to commit the resources necessary to meet those goals. There'll be those who will say that we should walk away from human spaceflight as a result of this accident. It's been said. I disagree. The question is not whether we should have a human space flight program. The real question is how to make that program as safe and productive as possible. My view is that we should complete the International Space Station as originally planned so that it can be a productive research facility. We need to fix the shuttle, and as part of that effort, take a serious look at how best to protect the crews that are going to be flying the shuttle for the next 10 to 20 years. Finally, we need to get some concrete goals for human exploration beyond the space station. Establishment of human exploration goals would ensure that we make the appropriate investments in our space program would revitalize the NASA workforce and would serve as a source of inspiration for both the NASA workforce and the American people. With respect to crew safety, I'd note that just a month ago, the House of Representatives unanimously approved an amendment that I offered up, that many of us on this committee had offered up at the committee level here. We all agreed on safety. We just couldn't agree exactly on how it was to be done. So my amendment simply said to launch out onto a program for safety, a study as to how to get that safety and to who ought to do it, not to assess blame, but to be grateful to those that made the program great, that put these people, magnificent men and women, into the air and brought them back safely so many times. I think we're going to continue to rely on the shuttle for a lot of years to service the space station. We need to do everything we can to ensure that if this shuttle comes under threat in the future, the crew is given every possible opportunity to survive. I didn't send up that amendment to cause any problems or to nudge anybody, but I sent it up simply to say to the world that we're interested in safety, we care about safety, and we're going to launch a program designating and designing how we can make it safe. And if we don't do that, we may not have the shuttle as safe as it should be if we should have another tragedy in the next 5 years or 8 years or 6 years or 6 months or 10 months. But we'd better be on our way, and we better have a program to show the American people that we are trying to make it safe for the men and women who will man the shuttle. We have to do that. That's our goal. That's my goal. And if we don't have that well underway or completed, when we have another tragedy, we can forget about the space program. I don't want to do that. I yield back my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hall. Mr. Rohrabacher.
First of all, I'd like to thank Ralph Hall and our Democratic colleagues for their bipartisan spirit that we've had on this committee since this tragedy. This could be a very tumultuous time for us all, but we've worked together and we have kept politics out of it, and we've all been trying our best, as just demonstrated by Ralph Hall's wonderful statement. So we appreciate that, Ralph, and all the work you've done. Also like to thank Chairman Boehlert for his leadership, and Chairman Boehlert for his good judgment during this very vexing time. Now it's our time to pick up this job, and Admiral Gaiman and his crew have done a terrific job, a wonderful job. Now it's time for us to do our job. So our work actually, you might say our work actually begins today. Today's hearing is the first step in understanding, on this end of hearing anyway, what went wrong with the Space Shuttle Columbia, and what went wrong with NASA, and what choices we have in the future, what type of vision we must have in order to achieve the goals that we set as part of that vision. We are greatly indebted to Admiral Gaiman and the whole Columbia Accident Investigation Board for what they've done and for a terrific and an outstanding job. Their work will be an invaluable resource for us as we now move forward to solve the problems at NASA and to set a course for NASA in the future. A key element of NASA's success in the past was a clear national objective and purpose when it came to our space program. Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, all were involved, of course, with beating the Russians to the moon, and all of that was something that Americans understood, all of us as American citizens, of people in the government, people in the legislative branch, people in NASA. We all knew what that goal was and the vision, and we were behind it, and we were part of the team. Our civil space program today suffers from a lack of strategic vision and a lack of broader national goals. Putting America's space program back on track means more than fixing a flawed piece of shuttle technology. In fact, the shuttle itself remains a major question mark as we go through the findings of the Gaiman report. For the last 30 years, NASA may well have been on the wrong path when it comes to the shuttle. The shuttle has failed miserably to meet its original goals, and our reliance on such a complex, high-risk technology has drained billions of dollars from our Treasury and billions of dollars from other space programs, and it has regrettably cost us too much money and cost too many lives. Now, there have been successes in the shuttle program as well. I was part of the Reagan administration when the first shuttle landed, and I know how important the shuttle was to inspiring the American people at a time when our national spirits needed inspiring. And who can say what type of a contribution that made, seeing that shuttle land and knowing it was probably one of the most magnificent engineering feats in all of human history. That did inspire us. And how many billions of dollars were added to our economy? Hundreds of billions by that inspiration. And that has to be put into the equation as well. Yet, when focusing on the loss of our bravest astronauts and our brave astronauts, we must want to make sure that we look at human space travel in the future, that we do, as Ralph has just stated, we do our utmost to ensure that we are protecting those astronauts and those people putting their lives on the line as well. But with that in mind, we should not close the door on human space travel. The astronauts who have given their lives would not want us to turn around, would not want us to be earthbound because lives were lost. They knew the risk they were taking, and that's why they are unique among American heroes today, and we honor them in this hearing, and we honor them by moving forward. It is a risky venture to move forward into space with human beings, but I would submit today that it is worth the risk. We have the rare opportunity to help NASA today, and with Admiral Gaiman's help and of his team's help, to break the bureaucratic malaise that has gripped the NASA bureaucracy for too long. Our space program should be about expanding American freedom into a new frontier, and to carry all of humankind to new heights, into the heavens above and into a better life here on this planet. It is not the time to turn around. It is the time to move forward and do what is right, to finish the space station and to move forward with new technologies that will carry us to greater heights. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your leadership, and I look forward to working with you in the weeks ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rohrabacher. Mr. Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief because I think that you did an excellent job in laying out our charge before this committee, and I think that if we'll follow your outline, we'll all be well served. And let me also say that that I think we all should be grateful to Mr. Hall's tenacious efforts before, and I'm sure they're going to be continuing to bring us back to flight, but also in a safe manner. And I look forward to working with my friend from California as our committee works to oversee the progress of this report. So, Admiral Gaiman, let me join everyone in welcoming you and certainly your board here, or the members of the board that came today. And more importantly, I want to thank you for 7 long, I'm sure, months. They were longer for you than for a lot of folks. You've done a good job. Now, excuse me, Admiral Gaiman, your report warrants a thorough public airing, and this hearing will be an important initial step in that regard. And as I reviewed the report, I found that there were a number of things that were troubling to me. And let me mention just a few. I'm troubled that NASA failed to heed early reviews that identified many of the same problems you described in your board's report. I'm troubled by your finding that NASA's safety system has repeatedly fallen short of the mark. I'm troubled by your conclusion that, in your words, years of workforce reduction and outsourcing have culled from NASA's workforce the layers of experience and hands-on systems knowledge that once provided a capacity for safety oversight. I'm troubled by your report's finding that the pressure by NASA's headquarters to meet an artificial space station core complete milestone may have unduly influenced shuttle managers' decisions. And I'm worried that we've seen echoes of that pressure in some of the headquarters pronouncements on the timetable for shuttle return to flight. So, Admiral Gaiman, fixing the problems identified by your report will take time and money. We should not kid ourselves in that regard. And I'd like to get your views on how expensive and how time-consuming that effort is likely to be. When NASA submits its proposed budgets for fixing the problems, we need to know whether they are going to be realistic. And I'd also like to get your views on what benchmarks this committee should be seeking for NASA to determine whether or not they are complying with your report's finding. We've got a lot to cover today. I'm anxious to hear what you have to say, and once again, thank you and all of you for being here with us.
I want to thank all my colleagues for their opening statements, and all the members will have leave to insert their opening statements in the record at this juncture. But now it's important that we get to our distinguished witnesses. And before anything, I want to say once again to Admiral Gaiman and to all the members of the board how sincere we are in expressing our appreciation for your thoroughness, for the scope, and for the independence you've demonstrated. You have done a great service, not just for the program or for the Congress, but for the nation, and we thank you for that. With that, let me present Admiral Harold Gaiman and the members of the Columbia Accident Investigation Board. And Admiral Gaiman, you may wish to introduce your colleagues individually.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hall, to the distinguished members of this committee, thank you very much for the compliments, and on behalf of the board, I accept those kind words for the board members who are not here. I'll introduce my colleagues here, and then I would ask the chairman to allow me to introduce my opening statement into the record, and I'll just say a few words and we can get right to the question.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, sir. Beside me, to my left, is Dr. Jim Halleck. Dr. Halleck is the manager of the Department of Transportation's Volpe National Transportation System Center from Massachusetts. Beside him is Major General Ken Hess, the commander of the Air Force Safety Center and the Chief of Safety of the U.S. Air Force. And beside Ken Hess is Dr. Sheila Widnall, the Institute Professor and Professor of Aeronautics and Astronautics and Engineering Systems at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and previous Secretary of the Air Force. I know that all the members of this committee feel, as the board does, that the tragic loss that this nation suffered on 1 February 2003 is a price that we paid that is so dear that it demands that we all do our part to ensure that an accident like this never happens again. I want to thank this committee and the leadership of this committee for helping this board get over a rough start the first couple of weeks, the first couple of months, to enable us to be at a position where we are right now, that we are discussing the merits of our report and not the process by which this board was founded. We can talk about that too. But we could not have gotten to this position had it not been for the guidance, cooperation, and mentorship of both branches of the Congress, and we appreciate it very much. Before I begin, Mr. Chairman, I would like to offer my thanks to my 12 colleagues on the board who gave up 7 months of their lives to produce this report. The approximately 120 full-time investigators and the thousands of NASA engineers and employees who helped us with this, not to mention the nearly 30,000 volunteers who walked shoulder to shoulder across the state of Texas, picking up 84,000 pieces of debris, which turned out to be instrumental in our reconstruction and forensic work. And to all of those unnamed and unsung heroes, we owe a great debt. Let me just make a couple of points. I committed a long time ago to this committee and to the public that our report would attempt to put this accident into context. And by context, I mean any one of several contexts. There's the context of the history of the human spaceflight program. There's the context of the budget process. There's the context of management and leadership. There's the context of all the previous reviews and investigations that NASA has gone through and whether or not they learn. And then there's the context, as has been mentioned this morning, of what is exactly our nation's vision of what we want to do in space and how does the shuttle program fit into it. Obviously, the first thing we had to do was determine the physical cause of this accident. We did. The foam did it. For those of you on this committee who may not be intimately familiar with the foam, I'd like to introduce you to it. This is an actual piece of foam. This is the left bipod ramp. The little black line here indicates approximately where it fractured. So this part of it here came off, and this is about the right size. This is the right size, and this is about what it weighs. And so this is the party of the first part here. This is what it looks like, in case somebody's not familiar with it. The board was very deliberate in how we chose our words about saying that the foam did it. We didn't say most likely. We didn't say all evidence supports. We didn't say it was the conclusion of the board. We said the foam did it, and so we are quite content with that, and we are quite sure of it, and we would be delighted to discuss that if you want to talk about it some more. If the foam did it, the board was then interested in answering the following question. If the foam caused this accident, was this a legitimate surprise, an anomalous event that had never happened before? Or, if not, was this something that happened before, and why wasn't it fixed? What was the process by which NASA went through attempts to understand and fix why it happened? Of course, as has been reported in the press, it was not a surprise anomalous event. This thing has happened before, and when we got into a deep, comprehensive analysis of how the shuttle program handles unknowns and risks and surprises, and how they conduct research and development to understand what's happening, and how they learn as an institution, we were not very pleased with what we found. And that, in a statement, takes about 150 pages in our report to document. Well, being concerned then with what we found, we then took two simultaneous paths to come to a set of recommendations. The first path was a path of academic and theoretical review of how to handle high-risk, high-technology institutions. How do you handle risky activities safely? The second path was a review of what we call best business practices or best safety practices. And that's a review of institutions in the United States that actually handle risky enterprises and do a good job of it. And what could we learn from those enterprises? From these two reviews, we took what you might call a sampling or a recipe or cookbook of the characteristics that we thought applied to NASA. We then took that template, applied it to NASA, and were not very pleased with what we found. We then concluded our report with what we consider to be concrete, specific, actionable recommendations to fix these management problems that we believe would go a long way toward making the operation of the shuttle more safe in the future. Let me just close by saying one word about accountability. The board does not believe that accountable persons can hide behind the excuse of bad management or culture or any other subterfuge. There is a role for personal accountability, and in our report, we think that the report is full of evidence of personal performance. But it's up to either the administrator of NASA or this committee if you decide to hold people accountable for their actions. The board decided long ago, announced publicly, and I will defend very strongly the position that we took, that it's not our job to sit in judgment over other people. However, all of the performance factors that you may be interested in are in the report. They're all in there. And if you or the administrator of NASA feels that some accountability is required, we did our job. We laid it out for you, and we don't think that that constitutes dodging the issue of accountability. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and my panel and I of colleagues here are delighted to be here and ready to answer all your questions.
Thank you very much, Admiral Gaiman. The report states that the board believes that the shuttle is not inherently unsafe, but it also says repeatedly that the shuttle is inherently risky and should be treated as experimental. And parenthetically, let me say, I couldn't agree more that it should be treated as experimental when, in the view of most, it was treated as operational. But how do you reconcile those two statements? I assume that you're never again likely to lose a shuttle if the vehicle is flying in the next 10 to 20 years. At what point does something become so risky that it becomes inherently unsafe? Did the board ever receive any convincing risk analysis from NASA for the shuttle program?
Mr. Chairman, we chose those words very, very carefully. We very carefully used a sentence with two negatives in it. The statement that the shuttle is not inherently unsafe was chosen to allow us to send the signal that we didn't think it's safe. It's not safe. It's risky. And we didn't think it's unsafe. If we thought it was unsafe, we would have recommended that we suspend flying operations. We would have said that. The board was under no pressure to allow NASA to continue to fly this thing. The board completely divorced itself from cost and schedule and International Space Station requirements. And we do believe that with proper management and proper skill and good, elegant management scheme, that the shuttle can be operated reasonably safely. But as you said, it is a risky enterprise and always will be risky.
What level of risk is that?
I'm going to let my colleagues in on this one because we have actually seen numbers. My own view is that the numbers have little or no validity, and numbers along the lines of the probability of a failure in a mission of 1 in 200 are kind of the most commonly accepted numbers. I'm going to let these people have also seen other numbers, and then I have a comment I'd like to make. Jim, you want to say something?
Dr. Halleck?
Push the button.
Yes, there are a lot of numbers that float around that we've been looking at. NASA has done a job in the sense of trying to look at the various things that could affect the shuttle. For example, the number that Admiral Gaiman just mentioned, the 1 in 200, is the chance of actually having a problem due to a micrometeorite or an orbital debris strike and actually cause loss of crew and vehicle. So the numbers are large, but there are many other types of things that they can run into that can be a problem too, most of which have been looked at, but once again, it's the compounding of all of these numbers that become important. Yes, it's a risky venture, but we have a lot of other risky ventures that we are involved with. In fact, sitting next to an admiral, I think immediately of submarines that go into an environment that is, much like the space environment. When you're well underwater, you're in a place where it's not very easy to escape from to get back to the Earth.
Yes, I obviously agree with the Admiral and Dr. Halleck in this issue. And in the course of our 7 months, I think we became fairly intimate with the fact that truly quantifying the risk in numeric terms for the shuttle is I think, a little bit like dreaming. I don't think you can actually do it. You can't quantify the risk of the human factor, interfaces, and all the different layers that are involved in making management and technical decisions, as well as the work that's ongoing every day with the shuttle. So you can probably estimate, but the error band is fairly wide. And so hanging our hat on a number is, after our study, nothing I would do with the shuttle. And I'm always reminded that yes, the technology is risky, and the uncertainty that's involved always causes you to question whether or not it is safe or unsafe to fly. But the difficulties that we've encountered in both Challenger and Columbia were of the human management decision style, not the technology itself. So I think the risk in the context is manageable, but it takes some elegant operations to do that.
Dr. Widnall, do you wish to add anything?
Sure, I'll add a little bit. I think I would certainly agree with my colleagues, and the phrase that I would use about trying to put numerical values on risk is that it's perhaps necessary but not sufficient. If you look at the risk of the shuttle, you can divide it into two parts. There's the physical characteristics of the hardware. You can sort of analyze and dig deep into how the hardware was qualified, what depth of engineering analysis was used, how safe do we feel the actual operation of the hardware is. But I think obviously more important are the organizational issues. And for me, the issue of how one decides to waive a requirement, how one decides to treat an anomaly and continue flying, the depth of engineering analysis that was applied to the various systems to, in some sense, certify them. I think these are very important issues, and they are not quantifiable.
Thank you. Thank you very much for outstanding answers.
Mr. Chairman, may I wanted to add something after they spoke. To get to your issue, though, it's illustrative, at least it was illustrative to me, that when you ask, the answer to your question depends on who you ask. For example, NASA has a number, they actually calculate a number for each mission. And if you go, for example, to the U.S. Air Force, which operates the Eastern Range where they launch it, and you ask them what their risk number is, you find it to be much different than NASA's number, which is very interesting. And in the case of the Challenger investigation, the famous Dr. Feynman quote at the end, he tried to address this question too, and he kind of said that kind of the best he could determine was 99%, 1 out of 100, which is of course much higher than NASA. So the answer to your question depends on who you ask. And if you ask an independent agency, you get a number which is more risky than if you ask NASA. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hall.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Admiral, of course, I want to get back to safety. I want to visit with you and the other three of you there. And the word risk and risky and risk assessment and risk containment and all that have been voiced, and of course proper words for this situation and for this report. And how many times have I heard these brave men and women, the astronauts, referred to as the Columbuses and the Magellans of space? And I often wonder how many ships were lost at sea and how many crews were before Columbus or Magellan or Americus Vespucius or whoever it was that hit this shores first, how many we lost and how much risk they were assessing, in a different risk. But I think we need to think in terms of we do have a risk, and we get the last guess at how to fix it, how to fix that risk. I know that even prior to the Challenger and prior to Columbia, I know that the President, after the Challenger, thought we had assessed the risk and had attended to it and had addressed it. I know the Congress thought we had. I know the NASA administrator, whoever it was at that time, thought we had. But obviously they thought we had a safe shuttle. And now, complying with your recommendations, we're going to think that we're making it safe, and we're going to think we've addressed the risk. Now, we were wrong twice. We can't afford to be wrong again. And I think that now is the time to start the journey toward doing something about it if we are wrong again, that we haven't assessed the risk, that we haven't pushed back any risk. I don't suppose it's possible to say it's absolutely, without any question, risk-free. No way to do that. I wish we could. But we can certainly, in case we're wrong, we can have a way for those that are aboard that vehicle to survive. Now, we've asked for that before. I know that we've asked for it for at least 10 years since the last loss. And each time we've been told that we can't have a vehicle aboard the vehicle. I think a gentleman from California has addressed that a lot of times. And the answer we always got was, well, the weight. It's a weight problem. And it's a money problem. And it is both of those problems. But now, before we send anybody else up, even though we think we've addressed the risks, we've touched every base that we can humanly touch, we need to touch one more base and have them have a way out in case we're wrong again. So, with that, Admiral, let me say, your report contains some, quote, observations, unquote, about crew escape systems for the shuttle. And it mentions the fact that the Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel's 2002 report recommended that the NASA consider upgrading the shuttle to include crew escape systems in view of the shuttle's proposed life extension. And that makes sense. That should have been done. Yet, your report does not actually make a recommendation one way or the other that I can see about adding a crew escape system for the space shuttle. Now, you know that a lot of us feel very strongly that this is an area that NASA needs to address if this decision is made to fly the shuttle for an extended period. Without asking the question of why we sent this particular shuttle, why we sent the oldest one we had, why we sent the one that couldn't dock at the space station, why we sent the one that wouldn't have available the telescope, all those things are assuming blame to somebody. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in causation. I'm interested in doing something about it if we're wrong again on our risk assessment. So we owe it to them to give them a fighting chance. The loss of another shuttle would not, should not, inevitably, absolutely mean the loss of the crew. So let me just ask you directly, if NASA plans to fly the shuttle past 2010, should NASA be required to develop escape systems for the crews that will be flying those shuttle missiles? It's a good yes answer, isn't it? If you can't knock that one out of
No, as long as you say they should consider, the answer is yes. In my opinion, the answer is yes. The board did not do an in-depth study of that issue, so I'm not speaking for the board here. But we did. We looked at that issue a little bit, and as long as it's couched in the terms of should they consider it, the answer, in my opinion, is yes.
Dr. Halleck, you have anything to add to that?
No, I agree with that in the sense that one needs to always look at possible ways to be able to allow the crew to survive.
We don't need to just look at them. We need to do something about them. We need to get underway with it and find people that are more intelligent than those of us in Congress are. All we have to do is come up with the money. But found those of you out there who are givers and are giving your time here today, have given your life to what you're doing, we need you to come up with a way for those people to get out of there if something happens. You can be catapulted out of an F-16 or whatever. I can't understand why, with all the modern technology and all the intelligence and the genius we have here, a lady at MIT and a general that's given his life to this country, Dr. Halleck, that studied all of your life and been smarter than almost everybody else you knew or you were around. Surely to God you can come up with some way to get people out of there if they say, hey, the damn thing's knocking, there's a rod knocking in it. Let's get out of here. What? Yeah, Dr. Widnow.
Sure. I guess maybe what I need to do is define the word consider, because I think if one proceeds down that road, and I think it is a good idea, it would take a really in-depth engineering analysis and a consideration of perhaps design options and a calculation of what this would actually be, what would its characteristics be, and in fact, would it make the shuttle as a vehicle more risky or less risky? And that is the calculation that has to be done.
Sure, weight and structure and strength.
Materials. Sure. Let me just mention as a...
Jack Kennedy had to have thought of all of those things before he ever launched the first one.
Let me just indicate the particularly demanding environment that the shuttle saw when it re-entered. Re-entering at Mach 25 at those altitudes, those kinds of temperatures, 10,000, 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. There are few materials that will withstand those kinds of temperatures, and so it's a very challenging engineering problem. But that would be my definition of the word consider.
Well, we knew the velocity of the foam that you shot into that trial wing. We knew the speed at that time. We knew all those things before the Columbia loss. We knew that could happen. Why can't we use that? Why can't we use our genius to come up with a vehicle that will save these people if we're wrong about attending to the risk assessment? Why can't we do that?
It's perfectly reasonable to start down that road.
And wouldn't you be very uncomfortable if you left here today and didn't believe that we were going to start down that road, whether we get down that road or not, that we're underway trying to get down to that road, and that we're lucky enough and have enough support from up above that we don't have a tragedy before we get to the end of the road of finding that answer?
I think it's
we'd better
reasonable.
Dang well be underway, hadn't we, if we have another tragedy?
Yeah, it's a completely reasonable path to take.
Because I'm going to support the NASA administrator. I'm going to work with him from this point forward. I'm going to try to comply with the Admiral's recommendations. I'm going to work with everybody on this committee. But I want us to be underway, to find a way in case we're wrong and we're not successful at doing what we think we're doing about risk, that we can get them out if it happens. I yield back my time.
Thank you very much. The Chair of the Subcommittee on Space and Aeronautics, Mr. Rohrbacher.
Thank you very much. And with due respect to Mr. Hall, I'd like to sort of take this from the other side of the coin. Admiral Gaiman, isn't your finding that we should be trying to minimize our reliance on the shuttle rather than trying to invest more into the shuttle and so it could be used more in the future?
Yes, sir. Our recommendations are a series of recommendations to make the present operation of the shuttle more safe, but our recommendation is to replace the vehicle as soon as possible. And in our editorializing in Chapter 9, we specify, to get back to Mr. Hall's point, that whatever it is that we replace the shuttle with, that the concept of the operation should be to separate the crew from the cargo. Because as long as you keep the crew and the cargo together, you have to sub-optimize human safety, and therein is the dilemma.
So we should do our best to phase out the shuttle and go to a new system rather than trying to bolster the capabilities of the shuttle.
The board wrote that the board was surprised and disappointed to find ourselves here at 2003 without a replacement vehicle even on the drawing board.
In terms of what we have to do and what the shuttle is necessary for in the future, space station is certainly something that will not be completed without the shuttle. And even to make the type of safety upgrades that we've been talking about today will take a certain length of time that would go well into station's lifespan. Do you have any recommendation at all in terms of whether the shuttle should be used to complete the space station, given its current risks?
The board report, I believe, speaks very clearly to the subject of operating the shuttle in what we call the midterm. It's like 2 to 15 years or 2 to 10 years. And in there, we specify very clearly, I believe, that the present management scheme is not adequate to operate the shuttle safely. Technically, hardware-wise, as long as you take care of the shuttle and as long as you aggressively investigate every single waiver and every single anomaly, we believe the shuttle can be operated for another 10 years with a degree of safety.
So if we change one of the central findings, if we come to grips with one of the central findings of your commission, which is the culture or attitude of what was going on safety-wise at NASA, that might in itself enable us to reach a safety threshold in which the shuttle could be used to complete the work on station.
That is correct. Any board members want to I mean, that is the central core of our recommendation, and that is that the present management scheme tends to hide or overlook or not react to those little tiny signals that something's going wrong. And it's those little tiny signals like foam coming off and things like that that you have to go after aggressively. And we can't predict what the next thing to go wrong with the shuttle is, but we do know that the present management scheme is not good enough to catch it.
Mr. Rohrbacher, just let me intervene if I may, and it won't be taken out of your time, but little tiny signals. Shuttle after shuttle, debris, foam comes off. They assumed that since it came off, they assumed too much, that there was going to be the size of the previous foam and no larger. And isn't the basic thrust of your whole report that too much was assumed and they weren't skeptical enough?
Absolutely correct. And they didn't have the resources to have a robust research and development department, and the engineers were all funded from the shuttle program, so they're not going to tell their boss that he's in trouble, and et cetera, et cetera. But yes, sir, you're exactly right.
Thank you, Mr. Rohrbacher.
That, of course, is the difference between being proactive and being reactive. And, in fact, I think your report suggests that the NASA attitude went beyond being reactive. We're actually blasé towards some of these signs that Chairman Bullard has just pointed out. Let's go to that attitude now. As soon as we get done with these beeps and buzzes. Did your commission find that this lack of energy or this blasé attitude or bad culture, however we want to call it, that this was part of the NASA culture in the past during the Apollo programs and other programs, or was this something that has just sort of evolved into place in these last 10 to 15 years?
We spent a lot of pages trying to answer that question, Mr. Rohrbacher, and it is our conclusion that it appears to us that if you study history and you study the previous reviews of NASA management, and NASA's never not being reviewed by somebody, so there are a lot of data points out there, that it seems to ebb and flow. After a big tragedy like Apollo or Challenger, they take a whole lot of management actions to make the program more safe and make it more sensitive to engineering problems. And then over the years, forces begin to act on NASA. And some of these forces are external forces, by the way. Some of these forces are budget pressure or schedule pressure put on by both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. And NASA then starts to migrate or morph its management scheme to be more effective, more efficient, more cost-effective. And we specifically found, for example, that in this particular case that we were looking at so carefully, the Space Shuttle program management actually had been squeezed to the point where the program manager had so much authority, so much responsibility, and so much authority that he could trade schedule against safety upgrades. He could trade costs against research and development, and we found this to be unhealthy.
One last thrust here, and that is this attitude and this evolution in the wrong direction. That does have something to do with a lack of vision and a lack of goals of the whole space program, does it not? We have a saying on top of us here. It says, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." And let us note that when there is no vision, astronauts perish. And is that not what we're talking about here?
We noted in our report that a lack of an agreed national vision causes NASA to have an unclear set of criteria on how to make decisions.
And leads to that attitude.
It absolutely does.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Chairman Rohrbacher. I hope that you will continue this effort to try to find that vision. I think it is very important. A couple quick questions because, as you know, we're caught here with the bells. As you're well aware, Admiral Gaiman, you had to make a variety of changes to the original charter that was set out in this contingency plan to develop a commission that you felt comfortable with. As I understand it, we revert back to that original charter now if there is some problem in the future. Would it be fair to say that this committee ought to review reviewing that original charter and making some changes so that if there is another occasion that we'll be better prepared early on?
To my knowledge, the NASA contingency plan, which created this board, is still in existence, and the words haven't been changed. And if you feel that that contingency plan is not right, yes, it should be reviewed.
Well, you obviously did because you asked for it
That's
to be
correct.
changed a variety of times.
That is correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, as you have said on a variety of occasions, outside the specifics of the foam, a lot of what your work was rehashing the McDonald report. And if NASA had done a better job of following the McDonald report, we may or may not be here, but we'd be in a better situation. I think it's very important, as our chairman pointed out earlier, that when the crowds diminish and you're gone home, that at least this committee doesn't lose its enthusiasm for oversight and for setting up benchmarks. And again, as the chairman said, that's more than just goodwill. It's the deeds. So what I'm going to, because I think we can't get it all done today, but I'm going to write you and ask that you lay out your thoughts on how or what kind of benchmarks, what type of processes that we need to set up to see that these things are followed as we had hoped the McDonald would be. And you can do it more extensively later in that letter, but I'll let you go ahead now. If you would like to give this committee advice as to what kind of benchmarks we need to set up, and if you would help us also talk a little bit about what kind of rough dollar figures that we need to be looking for.
The board agreed with me that we would not be doing a thorough job if we did not study history. And we studied the history of NASA and the history of the investigations, of previous investigations of NASA, including what we found in retrospect to be a very, very good report done just 3 years ago by Harry McDonald. But also we went back to the Rogers report and the Norm Augustine report and the Kraft report. I mean, and all of these reports, which we carefully documented, you might say we found nothing new. NASA has been told over and over again that a number of the things they're doing increase the risk to the shuttle. I think your question, though, is really an excellent one, and that is 2 years from now or 3 years from now or 4 years from now, how do we ensure ourselves that the follow-up, that the progress is there and that the follow-up is there, and that this natural migration of these good traits back to bad traits doesn't occur again like it has happened in the past. And the board has discussed this a little bit, and we would be delighted to dialogue with you on how you get at that, because I think that is the central question.
I know you're going to be around a little longer. You'll have staff a little bit longer, and if I will send a letter of request and would welcome your advice as to how we can follow up on that. There's lots more, Mr. Chairman, but I guess we better go.
Well, I think we get in one more round. We have 8 minutes to go, so we'll go to Mr. Smith of Texas, and then we'll take a brief pause. We have 2 votes, and we'll get right back. This is very important.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Gaiman, let me get directly to my questions. The first is that the report raised a concern about greater priority being given to scheduling demands than safety. Who or what put these scheduling pressures on the individuals involved?
We believe that we got right to the bottom of that in our report. And when you ask senior managers at NASA to a person, 100% of them deny that there was any schedule pressure. And then when you go down and talk to the worker bees, the project people are actually working on the shuttle program. To a person, they say that there was enormous schedule pressure. So schedules, of course, are not bad things. I mean, everybody uses schedules as a management.
Do you think the pressures were more internal than external?
I think that there was a great difference of opinion between the senior managers and the junior people. And of course, anytime you got the senior managers working on one set of script and the other people working on another one, you got a dangerous situation.
So conflicting responses.
Complete miscommunications as to what the truth was.
Admiral Gaiman, none of the external advisory groups voiced concerns about the foam, despite the fact, as we know, that foam has been falling off consistently. What significance do you attach to the fact that none of those concerns were raised?
Thank you, sir. And by the way, that of course struck the board right in the forehead like a 2-before, that these wonderful previous panels, including Rogers, missed the significance of the foam coming off. If we're so brilliant that we can see that foam is a hazard to the shuttle, why didn't all these other people see it? And the way we answered that was that we have to set up a management scheme that can detect this kind of stuff, knowing that it's very hard to detect. And the management scheme that we put in place would be one in which waivers or exceptions or violations to the specifications would be reviewed by a group of people who have no interest in cost and schedule. That's the only way we can see to safely get things like foam. And oh, by the way, the board felt it very important that we come up with others, by the way. We think it's kind of a cheap shot to criticize NASA for missing the foam. So we said, okay, if you're so smart, tell me what the other ones are. And we came up with half a dozen other ones that are very dangerous, in which they've decided to waive. I know, and my panel members, I know, for example, Dr. Woodnall might want to comment on the testing of bolt catchers and things like that. So, you know, there are others. So the answer to your question is this independent technical review authority.
A couple more questions real quickly, Admiral. Let's say you expressed concern in the report about the drastic reductions in government inspectors and the mandatory points of inspection, which actually started in the early 1990s. Was this intended to shift greater responsibility to the contractor, or was it to meet budgetary constraints?
It was both. They assumed that their belief was...
Neither of which was good.
Neither of which was good. They assumed that the maintenance and preparation for launch of the shuttle, they'd done it so many times, they thought it was a routine operation and could be contracted out.
Lastly, Admiral Gaiman, if the shuttle flies again, and we hope that it does, is there any reason why it would be limited only to servicing the space station? Is there any reason why it couldn't continue to service other science missions, including the Hubble?
No, there is no reason except that the on-orbit inspection repair capability, which we recommended, would be different for the two missions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Just let me make an observation. Waivers is something we're going to get into in greater depth a little bit later on. There are over 3,200 waivers been granted. Over 1,000 of them hadn't been reviewed in more than a decade. So that is something you rightly emphasized, and that's something we should focus on. But before that focus, we have to take leave for a few minutes to go respond to the call of the House. We should be back within 15 minutes. If you would like coffee or I can't give you a break to go sailing, Admiral, but we can give you. Staff will try to accommodate anything you might want. If you want